All right, welcome to Implementing Multimedia Accurately to Help All Students Learn. My name is Trisha Hoffman. I will be your instructor or guide for this short presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's a quick outline for today. We're going to look at student-centered classrooms. We're going to look at what multimedia actually is, how it can be integrated, and also how we can effectively implement multimedia in our classrooms and presentations. So first, let's look at our student-centered classrooms. Originally, classrooms were teacher-centered. I believe that most all of us probably grew up in these student-centered or teacher-centered classrooms where the teacher, as you can see in this picture, the teacher is the center of the learning experience. Oftentimes, the teacher is lecturing, students are taking notes. We wrote lots of notes when I was in school and then basically regurgitated the information onto exams, showed our rote memorization, showed what we had learned in the class, and the next day the teacher would lecture again. We would learn and prove our knowledge on an exam. Today, as we know, classrooms have become more student-centered. So as you can see in this picture, the students are the center of the classroom. The teacher's walking around and helping them, but they are doing their learning. They are involved in the learning. And that's what we want to see in the classrooms today. So let's look at multimedia. It can be text, it can be images, it can be audio, video, or animation, which as you saw, these all came in through a different animation. So when we look at multimedia, there are lots of different forms that we can include on presentations, that we can include in our classroom. Obviously, we're familiar with all of these. They're very common in today's world with technology. So the benefits of multimedia. So it can approach various learning styles. It can increase attention in presentations, and there is a differentiation for all students, which is a big term in education today, where we want to make sure that we are differentiating and that every student has the same opportunities to learn. When we look at learning style, there actually, as you can see here on this quote from Costa and Al, learning styles are elements that identify and define the way an individual learns. So that's your basic definition of a learning style. You can see here in the Venn diagram, you can see the different types of learning styles that there typically are. Aslaskin and Loras define the concept of learning styles as a textbook approach for tailoring the pedagogical practice to individual differences in learning styles. So most people are familiar with like auditory learners, visual learners, or kinesthetic learners. Those are probably the three main ones. We're going to talk about one more in just a minute, but most people will say that they are a visual learner or that they are an auditory learner, and that's just the way that they prefer to learn information. They feel like they learn it best in that style. I was recently in Berlin, and I was visiting with a gal in the Marriott Lounge, and when I was talking to her about my PhD program, she said that, oh, yes, I'm a visual learner. If you show me a picture, I can see it. And it was funny because I had just learned about this. And so I told her that the empirical evidence does not prove that, we learn best if we learn it from our what we feel like is our learning style. And so we had a really good conversation about that. But here are the basic learning styles where people do prefer to learn. If we look a little bit closer, we can see an auditory learner, the visual learner, kinesthetic learner. We can also see here, as in the Venn diagram, where they obviously overlap, right? So maybe somebody is a visual and an auditory learner, right? They feel like they need to see it and hear it, right, to learn best, or a kinesthetic and an auditory learner, or a visual kinesthetic learner. So we understand the concept of a Venn diagram. There's the different ways that they can overlap. Here is just a slight variation of the preferred learning method from Kabul, and he says that we have visual, we have auditory, and obviously the kinesthetic, which we just talked about, but he also adds in the reading and the writing. So there's a little bit different, and this learning method is called VARK. So visual, auditory, reading, writing choice, and kinesthetic. So the use of multimedia in presentations. The main idea is to use bullet points. And as I tell my middle school kids, just because you put a bullet point before a sentence or a paragraph doesn't make it a bullet point, right? I tell them that it's not called bullet sentences or bullet paragraphs. So it should just be an actual point. And you want to have small amounts of text on the slides. And also the use of animations is helpful when teaching. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so obviously too much text on a slide. When you have too much text, this produces cognitive overload. So many of you maybe now are trying to read the text instead of listening to me, or you're trying to read the text and listen to me, and your brain is a little bit confused because you can't quite focus on the text or this short little poem here that you're trying to read while you're listening to me and what I'm trying to say. So this confusion causes cognitive overload, and it's too confusing for the brain to understand all of it adequately. So when we have too much text, it just is confusing. If we have audio as well, which is my voice right now. So we want to have small amounts of information so that our working memory can process it. It can comprehend what is going on with the least amount of energy, right? We want to be able to learn efficiently and not struggle and practice and absorbing too much information all at the same time. So when there's a paragraph of text, students will automatically try to read the slide at the expense of what I'm saying, as we just noticed on the previous slide. So we want short amounts of visual information on our slides. So the use of animations. So we want to make sure that we have one point at a time. This allows the students to work on things and to hear it and to focus on what we want them to focus on at a time rather than all of the information all at once. Okay, so sometimes it's just too much information all at once. Their eyes are going around trying to find the visual points. They're listening to you, is reading things. There's too many different things going on at the same time. So let's look at a few examples from my middle school students. Last week, they had to do a presentation, and this is an example from a grade 7. They were studying the Roman influences and feudalism, so we have talked about all of this in class. They had to do a presentation based on what they learned from the last 5 or 6 weeks of class. So as you can see from the slide, there was a lot of information on the slide. When he was presenting in front of the class, you can see the kids trying to read it. He actually did a really good job presenting as far as he did not read the slides. He faced the audience, he spoke to the audience. He didn't have to read all of this information that is on there, but as you can see, it's still a lot of information. And when we're trying to listen to him, our eyes automatically go to the screen and try to read it, and it just causes some confusion. So the feedback for him obviously is going to get it back down to our bullet points like we talked about and have less information on the actual slide. This slide he did better, right? He has his few points still there in sentences instead of bullet points, but he's getting closer. And then again, he was able to explain all of this in his presentation. Here again, a lot of information on the slide, and your eyes automatically go to reading it, even though he's speaking about it and explaining it in his own words. It just causes this confusion. And his in slide has a nice little picture. So here is a grade 8 example from one of our students, and they were looking at, it's a geography class, and they're looking at maps over time. Here is her outline for the class, or for her presentation. She's going to show 8 things. I'm not going to show you all of her slides because it was a bit longer than what we need to go through, but I'll show you a few examples from her slides. So her first slide, here's the 2 map comparison that they were supposed to be doing about boundary changes. She chose Europe. They could use any continent or country that they wanted to choose. So she chose here. She has the 2 slide comparison, after which she has her bullet points. Again, she goes through and explains these. She explains what she means by before World War I and after World War I. She explains some of the boundaries But these were her points to help her remember what she wanted to be able to explain during the presentation. And again, her side-by-side comparison, and then her bullet points of what she wanted to make sure that she remembered to explain in her own words during her presentation. So again, same idea. So she was very well organized. Here at the end, she has her conclusion. They needed to show the two maps from when they started to when they ended. So again, she has her two map comparison as well as her bullet points. She went through and was able to explain it all in her own words. So when we are looking at using our slides, we want to make sure that we have cueing, and we're going to talk more about that here in just a few minutes, as well as accurate visual and verbal cues. So those are the things that we're going to talk about next to make sure that they are correctly used, and we can use animations. So universal design for learning. Here at AAS, we have talked a lot about backwards by design. That is the program that we use for designing our lesson plans. We are currently redoing a lot of our curriculum, as you know, so we are working on starting at the end of the unit or the lesson and working our way backwards, what do we want the students to learn, and then designing the lesson around that. Multimedia can be done in the same way, right? What do we want the students to learn at the end of the presentation? Work our way backwards. One thing that is great for differentiation is the universal design for learning, which our school has talked about a little bit, so I'm going to throw a little bit more information in there for you. Here's the universal design for learning. So it's straightforward, right? Flexible, readily perceived. You can see how they go around here, and there's all these different information here for universal design for learning. The learning space accommodates students. I think this is one thing our school does really well. Our classrooms, almost every classroom has flexible seating. There are desks and chairs as well as couches or bean bags or carpets, pillows, different options. We also have in the hallway lots of tables and chairs. And when I first came to AAS, they had told me that we could use the tables and chairs out in the common areas. And I wasn't really sure if teachers would do that or if it would just be disruptive to the other teachers there. And I learned as soon as we got here, like everybody uses that. Kids are constantly out in the hallways. They are constantly using these really nice tables and comfortable chairs that we have set around. Teachers will send parts of classes out there to use them. The kids are able to work there. And I love this learning space, right, that accommodates students. So we try to let the students learn where they would like to learn and where they're comfortable learning and in an environment that they can learn quickly and well in. And then, of course, we want to be able to provide them with support. So, and minimize unnecessary physical efforts. So, as we talk about a couple of these things, AAS is currently moving to an inclusion model. I know most schools, probably worldwide, have been moving toward this model since I began teaching in the early 2000s. Our schools in the States where I taught were already used inclusion. Students were mixed up in the classes. AAS as an international school is a little bit farther behind in that because we don't have necessarily all the resources to include all students with different types of disabilities. And so we, as you know, we're working on that now, and that is kind of the goal over the next 4 or 5 years to have these resources in place at AAS to include all students. So when we look at classroom inclusion, we have gifted students, English language learners, students with disabilities, and culturally diverse students. As you know, here at AAS, we have all of these different types of learners in our classrooms right now, right? We have gifted students that we still need to be able to challenge, that we need to make sure that they are growing and learning as well. We have lots of English language learners as an international school. A lot of the students are learning English as their second or third or fourth language, and we need to be able to meet their needs as well. We also have students with disabilities that need more help, maybe need more time to complete things, maybe need to be seated in a place where there's not as many distractions, lots of different types of disabilities that students have in the classroom. And of course, we are very culturally diverse. So we have students from more than 50 countries. We have lots of different cultures that are in every class. And so we need to be aware of them as well and make sure that they are included. So how do we implement the multimedia effectively, right? The one main thing is the correct use of visual and verbal cues. So you have a picture here, probably everybody recognizes it as the Eiffel Tower. I remember the first time that I went and visited the Eiffel Tower. It was in 1999. I visited with my family. I had lived in Europe for a year and a half before that, and we came back to kind of tour and show them places that I had lived. And this was my first trip to Paris. And we were able to climb the Eiffel Tower. You can take an elevator, you can take the steps. And my family's pretty active, so we took the steps up to the first level. And from the first level, you can see out and get a little view of the area there. So I'm sure everybody can see the first. Oh, maybe you can't see the first area. Do you see where I'm talking about when I say like the first area that we climbed to? Maybe that's something that you're trying to figure out right now. Like, which part of this Eiffel Tower is she talking about? Is she talking about down on the ground? Is she talking about higher up? So you have my verbal cues. I'm telling you that it's a first area. It's the first part that we hiked up to. But maybe your brain is trying to find where that is. So the use of visual cues. If I'd had this up while I was talking, then you would see immediately where I was talking about and you wouldn't have to be trying to find it. So that correct use of visual and verbal cues, of coordinating them so that the students know exactly what to look at. If you're trying to show something on a picture or show something on an image, they don't have to be trying to find where to look or what you're talking about while you're talking. If you show them, then they know exactly where to look and they can concentrate on what you're saying or telling them about that. So once you leave that section, you can then again hike or take an elevator up here to the third section. And there you have the visual cue to help with my speaking so that you know exactly where I'm talking about there. And if you are a bit adventurous, you can hike, or there is, again, an elevator that you can take here to the very top. And from the very top of the Eiffel Tower, obviously you can see a great, great view of Paris. So also here on the second layer, there are some shops. There are little souvenir stores. You can walk around and buy things while you are there visiting. So again, the use of visual and verbal cues is very helpful when using a presentation so that it reduces the cognitive load of trying to figure out where the instructor is talking about. They can then just listen to the audio or the verbal in this case and know exactly what they are supposed to be learning. So when you have visual or auditory, the empirical evidence shows that it does not consistently improve the learning outcome, right? So just visual, just auditory does not actually improve learning outcome. I found this very fascinating as we did our research throughout this course because I have always felt that I was a visual learner. I feel like if you show me these pictures, I'll remember it a lot longer and quicker and easier. And so I was fascinated by the research that we did in class to learn that the empirical evidence actually does not support that. However, there is evidence that's showing that visual and auditory, it does help with the retention and knowledge transfer. And so when we're working on our presentations, when we're teaching in class, if we show a visual, if we have the audio, so in my Eiffel Tower example, I had the visual, so that's, you can see the Eiffel Tower. Then I'm talking to you about it. I also had the arrows for the visual, and I'm talking to you about it. So you're getting the input of the information through visual, through what you see, as well as through your ears, auditory. And so the combination of both helps with the retention and knowledge transfer. So I found that super interesting and something that I will continue to use throughout our courses. And I'm suggesting here at AAS that we implement this as well in our presentations and in our classrooms. When you have narration, there should not be any text. This is a unique experience, I guess, or an example, because here at AAS we have so many English language learners that we often put the subtitles on videos or different things so that the students can read it. The empirical evidence actually shows that the text, if there is text with the narration, that again, it's too confusing. Your eyes will be reading the text while you're hearing the narration, but you will actually miss a lot of the graphics. I have found this to be true in my own life. Again, just anytime that there are text or subtitles on videos or on movies or shows, even if it's in English, I find myself reading the subtitles. And then obviously, because you're looking at the bottom of the screen and you're reading something, then I'm missing some of the graphics, some of the actions in the movie or the show. So I do understand how this pulls in your cognitive load, because you're trying to read, you're trying to listen, but then you're also trying to watch the video and the graphics, and it's too much information. I do find that if there's text, then like I said, I automatically read it, even when I can understand the voice, I can understand the movie. It's in my native language. It's clear. I could tell myself, don't read the subtitles. I don't need to know the subtitles. I can just watch the subtitles are on for somebody else. But I constantly find myself, I'm just reading the subtitles. And so that's something that we can work on here at AAS, and just making sure that the words are clear so that students can hear it and understand it, and maybe not have so much graphic and narration and text, which creates cognitive overload. So multimedia can make learning more difficult if misused. I know throughout the pandemic, the last couple of years, teachers were thrown into the use of technology, right? Basically overnight, schools worldwide closed down. Teachers had to go online and teach online, whether they were prepared to or if they knew how to or not. It was just a matter of the world was closing, and that's what we had to do. So we had to make it the best to our abilities. Even Google and Loom and Screencastify and all these programs made tons of updates over the last year or two in order to accommodate the amount of people that were using their programs online, and to give out like free options where Zoom had 50-minute free meetings for a long time. I think they've even updated that and given people more options. I know just the kinks and the problems with being online. There's so much technology upgrades and updates that we've had in the last few years because of the pandemic. But if we are throwing multimedia into our presentations or into our classrooms quickly and unprepared, then it just makes the learning more difficult because it's not organized maybe, and it's not visual enough for the students to be able to use, or it's too much visuals, as I've showed in some of the slides, where there's too much information and students can't comprehend that amount of information. So while we are using multimedia a lot in education today, it's important to make sure that it is well used. So a couple of the things here you can see on my bullet points is to make sure you have accurate visual and verbal cues. So if you have a picture, you can use cues, you can use arrows, you can use a laser pointer, right? I use that a lot in my classroom. I point out the part of the face that we're trying to look at, on an image, or what their hand is doing if you're looking at their hand. So you can use a laser pointer. So somehow to accurately show the visual and verbal cues, so that what students are hearing from me explaining, they can quickly see and find, either with the laser pointer, with an arrow, with a pointer, something that will show on the slide what I want them to be focused on. So they're not looking around for the focus. The focus is shown to them quickly, and then they can then concentrate on what I'm explaining about it, so they can learn about that specific detail. You can use animations, right? So bringing information on slides one point at a time allows the learner just to focus on that one point, right? And you can talk about that point, they can see it, you can talk about it, then you bring on the next point, again, they can see it, and they can talk about it. When everything is brought on all at the same time into a slide like this one, I should have done some animations for my bullet points. I'm noticing now as I'm explaining this. When all the information here is on the slide, you tend to just read through it, right? Probably you have already read through this whole slide, so you already know these different points that I'm going to make. So it would have been better then to bring them on one at a time. So the animations, that can decrease the cognitive load, right? So you are just being able to look at the one thing that I want you to look at. You're not worrying about anything else that's on the slide, and you have the brain power to just focus on that. This also helps to increase learning and retention. So you can increase your learning because you see it. You're going to remember it better because it's clear, it's organized. you able to focus on that part of your learning without focusing on lots of other distractions that are going on in the slide or the presentation. And also it can be differentiated for all students. So students that feel like they learn better verbally, they can, or auditorily, they can hear it, right? You're explaining it to them, they can listen to it, and they can hear it. Students that feel that they are more visual learners, then they can see the information on the slide. And as we learned, the combination of both of those is the best way to help with retention and differentiation, because students can then learn in their best method or their mode of learning. So you also then have the options of sending the PowerPoint home, right? Putting it into a video like I'm doing now that I can send out to teachers to help them learn about the multimedia. You can send it home to students. Students can then listen to it and watch it again, right? So there's lots of different ways that presentation can be differentiated for all students, right? You can add subtitles if they need to have more information. They can slow down my speech because I tend to talk really fast. They can slow it down, listen to it slowly, especially our English language learners that need to hear it maybe multiple times. They can rewind and hear different parts that they need to hear or focus on. So throwing in multimedia into a classroom is great. Make sure that it is used appropriately and is organized and differentiated so that all students can learn, and it is a great advantage that we have today in our classrooms. Here are a bunch of the references that I have learned from in the last few weeks. All of the material that I took today came from all of these different references as we've been studying them in class. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I hope that it can help you improve your use of multimedia in the classroom, especially here at AAS. That is the goal for this presentation that will be going out to the teachers at AAS as we try to work on our inclusion, and that is the goal at AAS for the next couple of years. So in order to include everybody in our classrooms, we need to have a little bit more support, and multimedia can do that, and it can also differentiate for those students who need more help. So I hope this presentation was useful for you. Thank you.